Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We've been talking about Western Canada today. I was out in Calgary, Alberta, a little while ago for the celebration of life for my uncle, Uncle Mike Hugh Crombie. And so, given that the topic is sort of about Western Canada, I thought I'd take this opportunity, if you don't mind, to share my eulogy that I had the honor of delivering at the funeral of Michael Hugh Crombie. I want to speak about Uncle Mike as an uncle and my impressions and experiences of and with him. So this will be a little less professional and a little bit more personal. I have a lot in common with my Uncle Mike and looked up to him from an early age. He was one of my two idols growing up, two uncles, Uncle Chip and Uncle Mike. Both had MBAs, were businessmen, were athletic, both fiercely competitive, and both married extremely well. Mike to Mare and Chip to Anne, and my dad's sister, Anne. I consider us Crombies incredibly blessed that we grew up with such great uncles and aunts. We lost my father, Mike's brother Dave, at a very young age, actually the age I am right now. And Mike called, emailed, messaged, and was kind to often give me fatherly or unclely advice, sometimes advice that was actually appreciated. Both Mike and I have as our middle name Hugh, both named for a great man, Mike's father, my grandfather, Hugh Crombie. One of my strongest recollections from childhood were numerous Sunday dinners at Granddad and Granny's house on Redpath in Montreal, or the top of the Acadia Court on Sherbrooke Street in downtown Montreal. It would be the six of us, my brother Dave, my sister Karen, my brother Colin, and myself, Jamie and Cindy Crombie, Mike and Mayor Crombie's kids, and often Ted, Joan, Fred, and Janet Cowie, cousins of my father's. Hugh Crombie always sat at the head of the table, carved the rare roast beef, and gave us scratchy kisses on the cheeks with his sharp mustache. We kids would line up to get spoonfuls of juice from the roast, a ritual that somehow made us feel connected to something larger, sort of almost like communion. Mike was very proud of his father, his army career, and his business career, spending time in Ottawa as a $1 a year man with the federal government during World War II, and his connection to Montreal and McGill. Mike was always telling me stories, exciting stories of business, deals, Churchill Falls, real estate development, business and sports. Marilyn, his wife, always stylish, often wore miniskirts, or at least that's how my kid brain remembers it. There would be great discussions around the table of Montreal's place in the world, the McGill-Redmond, the Habs, Expo 67, politics, and Trudeau, the elder Trudeau. Eventually, we kids would be kicked out and would go watch TV in the back room with Rosie, the maid. Those big family dinners, always pretty formal affairs where we'd wear jackets and had to have proper table manners, showed us the importance of family dinners, uncles and aunts, conversation, those spectacular cheese cookies with olives in the middle, rare roast beef, and I was amazed at how Granny could pull it all together week after week, Sunday dinners. Amazing. Both Mike and I were third born, and I think both of us had great sibling rivalry with each of our older brothers. Ironically, both named David Crombie. And we spent, each of us, a great bit of our high school careers trying to outdo their achievements. But then we both found out that our older sisters were really the big competition. For Mike, his sister Aunt Anne, and for me, my sister Karen. I remember Aunt Anne telling me stories about how Mike and her would compete at sport after sport after sport. In grade 10, in Miss Mifflin's class, I put my hand up to answer the question, and Miss Mifflin said, "Yes, Karen?" When I was called Karen, I felt it as a compliment because I figured she thought I was going to have something valuable to say. Mike attended Westmount High. Given the speech a little while ago on my political junkiness, I need to tell you about the famous fellow graduates of Mike's from Westmount High. Leonard Cohen, Stockwell Day, Mila Mulroney, Kamala Harris, and Mike Crombie. Mike loved McGill and was very proud of his time at Western's Business School. I wish I could hear some stories from those times because I'm sure they would be fascinating. We visited Mike and Mare several times in Stowe, Vermont, where Mike was in the resort real estate business. I was amazed by this cool metal circular staircase he had in this incredible A-frame house on the hills in Stoner, Vermont. We enjoyed swimming and diving and doing backflips in the hotel pool where he managed, going to the Von Trapp Lodge and pretending we were all Von Trapp family singers, and hiking, lots and lots of hiking. Mayor, am I imagining things again, or did you and Mike and my parents all go skinny dipping at Moss Glen Falls? I think it was at Stowe that Uncle Mike gave me the nickname Cannonball. I never figured out if it was a compliment or a warning to all others. We also visited at Nuns Island in Montreal for some very fun family times. However, when we moved to Toronto and then Mike and Marin family moved to Calgary, we saw each other less frequently. I guess that's the story of many Anglo-Montreal families. It's such a shame we all felt we had to move away. I have such fond memories of Montreal, Mount Royal, Ben's, McGill football games, Granny's convertible, Brome Lake, the Laurentians, Tremblant, etc., and our family dinners and wonderful times. But there's not one Crombie or Cowie left in that great city today. I really was interested in the Churchill Falls development that Mike was involved in and admired Mike's work there. He enjoyed telling us stories about the size of the development, the amount of water and electric power, and the real estate development opportunities. Mike inspired my business interest. He encouraged me to go to Western for business, where he got his MBA in 1960. I followed in his footsteps. He asked me about professors and cases, and then he asked me about my grades. Mike never was fussed about asking some pretty personal questions. I think he was very upset, though, when I also followed his brother-in-law, my other uncle's, Chip's path going to Harvard for my MBA. Mike and Chip, two men I greatly admired, really had an incredibly strange competitive relationship, almost like a sibling rivalry, even though they were just brothers-in-law. I think Mike was especially proud of my work at Molson's and with the Montreal Canadiens because of the Montreal connection. He would email and ask questions about the beer business and the Montreal real estate we were developing in the new arena. When I took business trips to Montreal, I'd frequently stop and visit his mother, my granny. She'd often introduce me to the nurses as her son, Mike. I figured that was a nice compliment. After Granny's funeral, it was Mike and I that went to the gates of McGill to bury her ashes. Me, very trepidatious of this exploit, but Mike picking out the tree and instructing me to put more back into the digging. It must have been very interesting to grow up with Granny as your mother, or Mare, it must have been interesting to grow up with Granny as your mother-in-law. Maybe Calgary had some attractions in that regard. My mother, Flora, always had some choice words about Granny, her mother-in-law, as well. One favorite time, maybe the last time everyone in the extended family was together, was Cynthia Crombie, my cousin's wonderful wedding, though it was 36 years ago this month. All the Crombies were there, other than Hugh. The three Crombie siblings, Dave, Anne, and Mike, their spouses, Flora, Chip, and Mare, and all of the cousins. And Granny, too. What a great weekend. What a great celebration. Collection of interesting people. When my own family moved to West Vancouver, Mike and Mare came to visit. Mike played grandfather for the weekend, chasing all the kids, pretending to be Dracula and saying, "I'm coming to suck your blood," over and over and over and over again all weekend long. But they loved it. They squealed and they ran away. Mike, myself, and my two boys, Alex and Jonathan Hugh, another Hugh, went for a bike ride. And I was humiliated when I had to walk my bike up the West Vancouver Hill, and Mike rode straight up and past me. His resilience and determination was truly inspiring. It was the start of Cypress Mountain, I have to say. We visited Calgary for the Stampede, I think 4 times, 1982, 1996, 2000, and 2022. And 2 or 3 of them with Cindy were wonderful hosts. I remember Cindy, my cousin, taking me out for drinks with many of her girlfriends once. Can't remember which trip. Mike would tell us about his company work, Evans Consoles, Panorama, Invermere, and his biking. When I started working with the hockey team again, one that was thinking about real estate development in Ottawa, Mike again emailed with questions, suggestions, and deal opportunities. He always had great ideas about how I could do a better real estate deal. When my work brought me to Calgary, I'd always invite Uncle Mike and Aunt Mare, and usually Cousin Cindy, out for dinner. Mike always wanted to go to Rodney's Oyster House and have some oysters. Never once anywhere else. He went countless times, a place where the staff certainly knew his name and always had his favorite oysters. The big ones, the great big ones. We had great conversations where Mike would grill me on what I was doing in business and in love. He had a great passion for understanding what others were doing and how and why, and never shied away from asking whatever he wanted to ask. At one dinner, we started talking about his brother, my father, Dave, and he asked about my eulogy for him. I said I repeated two favorite poems by Henry Drummond. Mike asked which ones, Little Baptiste and The Wreck of, Mike interrupted, The Wreck of the Julie Plante. He then recited both perfectly and completely from memory. Little Baptiste, you bad little boy, no much you care how busy you keep in your poor grand-père, trying to stop you every day from chasing the hen around the hay. But little Baptiste, please don't forget, we rather you stay the small boy yet. So chase the chicken and make them scare and do what you like with your old grand-père. For when you big fella, he won't be there, little Baptiste. One dinner, I remember him sizing up a young lady I brought to dinner. And then at the end of the wonderful dinner conversation, he stood up to say goodbye. He looked her up and down and said, "You're a 9. A 9, she cried. He said, well, you've got knobby knees. She didn't know to be complimented or aghast. It was so funny. Aunt Mary shrugged and said, you got to love him, and turned to this young lady and said, not sure I ever got a 10 either. As I mentioned, Uncle Chip and Uncle Mike had a strange relationship. I kind of think it was sort of like sibling rivalry, even though they were adults and brothers-in-law. But the night before my Uncle Chip passed away, guess what he had? Oysters, which I brought him. I'm not sure who liked oysters, business, great conversations, and their respective wives more. Chip and Mike were similar in many, many ways. They were both athletic and then married wives that were even more athletic than they were. I remember Chip commenting more than once about how impressed he was with Mike's resilience in dealing with his rheumatoid arthritis and taking up cycling and going so many places, cycling and then ultimately with his tricycle, keeping so incredibly active and always positive. He also was very complimentary about how Mike could attract and then have a great long marriage with such a beautiful, smart, and wonderful woman, my Aunt Mare. Mare, she was always a 10 plus for all of us. Thank you for your love over the years, your kindness, and your inspiration to your husband, Mike, to my Uncle Mike, and to all of your family. Uncle Mike was an exceptional athlete competing at cross-country skiing at the highest level for McGill. He played and enjoyed seemingly all sports, his cycling up to very recently a testament to his drive, stamina, and resilience. He loved business and deal making, and I think treasured learning about my and probably others' business deals and exploits. He had a wealth of experience, read, kept in contact with friends, peers, and always had some advice. He was extremely proud of his children. He would often brag about his son Jamie Crombie's accomplishments in squash and which competition he had just won. I often thought I sort of looked like Jamie. Well, I would have if I was extremely fit and 40 pounds lighter. Mike must have been incredibly proud when University of Western Ontario recently honored Jamie for a lifetime of athletic achievement in squash. Were very proud of him. Congratulations to Jamie Crombie. Mike adored his daughter Cindy Crombie, Cynthia, and talking about her and his grandchildren, their exploits, where they were and what they were up to. Going to dinner with Cynthia and having her call him Mikey all the time was so endearing. Uncle Mike was so proud that she was such an excellent mother and grateful of how caring and a loving daughter that she was. Every time we met, she would give me a great big hug and would say, hi, cuz. Cynthia also had her own health challenges with a brain tumor, and her resilience with that surgery was very inspirational. Every year when I see her post pictures of the photos of the scar that she had right around the side of her whole head, I thank God for her positive attitude. Michael Hugh Crombie, we will miss having oysters with him. We will miss his stories. We will miss his penetrating and very often personal questions. We will miss his presence in our lives, but we will remember him very fondly. Bruce Cockburn, one of my favorite Canadian songwriters, once described heaven in one of my favorite songs as a festival of friends. I like that. I hope that Uncle Mike opens up a bottle of wine, shucks some oysters, and shares a great dinner conversation with his brother Dave Crombie, wife Flora Crombie, sister Anne Crombie, husband Chip Goldsmith, Hugh Crombie, and his wife Joyce Crombie, Joyce Cowie Crombie. What a great man he was. What a great life lived. What an inspiration. Thanks for allowing me to share. Good night.